Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Koji-Rubbed steak. That's right, you know how they say if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is? Well, this experiment could have been that. Because recently I saw an article that claimed you could use koji rice to get the same effect you get from dry aging a steak for like a month and a half. And since the article was from a legit publication, and they had before and after pictures, along with testimonials to its effectiveness, I figured I would give this a try. And what follows is that experiment. So what they said to do was find some of this, koji rice, which I found very easily online. And I really hoped I'd ordered the right stuff, because there was absolutely no English on this package. But it did look the same as the pictures I saw, so I'm pretty sure this is the right stuff. And apparently what this is rice that's been inoculated with some kind of mysterious fungus. And this is what they actually use to make soy sauce and miso and sake and things like that. And apparently what you're supposed to do is grind this up and then use that to coat your steaks. And for that, I decided to use this mortar and pestle. In the article, it said to powder it, but I also saw that you had to scrape this off before you fried the steaks. So I thought if I just crushed it like this, it would be easier to get off the steaks, and I still would be able to coat it. So this is actually the only change I made to the method I read. But anyway, I smashed that up until I thought it was small enough to coat my steaks. And there they are, my test subjects, 2 beautiful, thick New York strips. So I proceeded to coat my steaks all over with that crushed koji rice. And we're calling this Koji-Rubbed steak because it sounds good. But there really wasn't a lot of rubbing going on. It was more like sprinkling and pressing. And then once that was set, I transferred those onto a rack for full air circulation. And as you can see, I put a few paper towels down on the pan because I thought I was going to have a lot of leakage, which turned out not to be the case. And then apparently all we need to do is put this in the fridge for 2 to 3 days, and boom, a dry-aged steak. So that's what I did, and this is what it looked like 2 3/4 days later. And what exactly has happened here? I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I couldn't tell if that fungus was growing or that was just the rice swelling. I really don't know. But it did look pretty similar to the pictures in the article, and it did have a very pleasant, very distinct, kind of nutty, dry-aged meat aroma. And then apparently what's supposed to happen at this point, we're supposed to scrape all that koji rice off the steak before seasoning and cooking. So I took the back of a knife and scraped that koji rice sludge off. And right here I was getting kind of excited because it really did have the appearance of dry-aged steak, which you're going to get a pretty good look at here. So at this point I was kind of thinking, hey, maybe this worked. So it kind of looked like the real thing, and it sort of smelled like the real thing, but was it going to taste like the real thing, which of course was the next test. So I cleaned that up and seasoned it very simply with some kosher salt. All right, for an experiment like this, you don't want any herbs and spices in the way. So I did just a little bit of salt before pan frying this in some clarified butter. And one thing I remember mentioned in the article was that because of the koji reaction on the surface, the meat would sear up a lot faster and a lot browner than usual. And as I turned this over, I found that to be absolutely true. That, my friends, is some serious crustification. But I'm not actually sure if that's the koji or from that surface being so nice and dry. But regardless, that is a beautiful crust. But anyway, I'm going to fast forward here a little bit because this is not a how to cook a steak video. We've done those. So we're going to skip ahead to when the steak was done, at which point it looked like this. And of course I had to let it rest before I cut in. And while I was waiting and admiring my steak's glistening beauty, I did notice a fairly distinct and quite pleasant dry-aged kind of steak aroma. It really did smell good. But then again, most steaks seared like this do. So I let that rest almost enough time before slicing in for the official taste test. And as I started to slice this, one thing that struck me is it felt kind of firm. Like a little firmer than I would expect. So that seemed a little odd, but I was thinking maybe it's just the crust. So I cut a few slices, and while maybe slightly past medium rare, it still looked very good, pink and juicy, and as I mentioned, had a very delicious smell to it. So far it passed the eye test and the nose test. But it was finally time for the most important test, the taste test. So I cut a piece and took a bite, and it tasted very good, like a good steak should. But did it taste like a steak that was dry-aged? Well, the answer to that is sort of. I would say it did taste different and possibly better than an untreated steak, as it did have that kind of nutty, subtle sweetness that a dry-aged steak will have. But what I found lacking was that kind of underlying funk that you get from that authentic dry-aged steak, which is really not an easy flavor to describe unless you've had it. So flavor-wise, I do think that koji added something reminiscent of a dry-aged steak, but texturally, not so much. Not only did this treatment not make it more tender, it seemed like it may have actually made it a little less tender. In fact, I cut a few more slices off that thicker end, which was cooked a little less, but I got the same results. So I was really hoping this technique would not only give the flavor of a dry-aged steak, but would also help produce a nice tender mouthfeel, which unfortunately really didn't happen. Now, is that because we went 3 days and not 2? Possibly. So in conclusion, can you really use koji rice to simulate dry aging steak? I'm really not sure, because I'm not sure if I even did this right. But if I did do this right, and that's how it was supposed to come out, I would say the answer is no. I really did enjoy how this tasted, but as far as simulating a dry-aged piece of beef that takes usually about a month and a half, I would say this 2 or 3 day koji method does not achieve quite the same results. So do I really hope you give this a try soon? I'm not sure. To put it another way, if I had to pick an emoji to describe this steak aged with koji, it would be the I'm not sure face. Do they have that one? I'm not even sure. But I still hope you head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.